Hello and welcome everyone, Slothcakes here to another Mobile Suit lore video. Now today we got something a bit different. We're not going to be looking at an amphibious mobile suit, but we're going to be looking at one of the most amphibious looking non-amphibious mobile suits. So this is kind of like a Amphibious Analysis Extra. But let's introduce the MS-13, not the gang, Gasshia, or Gasshia. Gatsha? Gacha? It depends what source you're looking at, the name changes, but we're just going to call it Gasshia because that comes off the tongue easier. And like usual, we're going to be looking at the lore, performance, weapons, all that jazz, and go into some theories of how this guy came to be, and also for the hell of it, let's look at if he was an amphibious mobile suit. But anyways, let's hop in. Developed in 0079 and first seen in December of that year, so very late into the 1 year war, the Gasshia was developed via the Peasant Project. This was a codename for a series of mobile suits developed in the Zeon asteroid-based Peasant. Examples of other mobile suits in this project are the Peasant Dwidge and the Gundam Alpha. The Gasshia is designed and developed from the Zagok, but you can easily figure that out by just looking at him. He clearly has inspirations and he just looks like an amphibious mobile suit. But we do have a similar body with being the head and torso being in one, with the mono eye in the middle, and we have a very similar arm which both have an iron nail at the end. Now he's classified as a prototype general purpose mobile suit, designed for low gravity, either be open space or bases, but he can also go on land. Now the big question is, why he look like that? Yes, he's based off the Zagok and that's why, but why? Why did Zeon make a spacefaring mobile suit that's inspired by an amphibious one? What are the benefits here? What do they gain from this? Was Zeon trying to prove something? Why did they do this? And while we know the process of him being based off the Zagok and his role, we don't have the information of why it came to be. So from here, we can speculate and give some theories. One theory is that some higher up at Zeon went to R&D and said, what if we made the Zagok, but made it more ground focused? And R&D said, you mean the Zogok? Yeah, but we took away the amphibious part and we made it go in space. Why would we do that? Because I write your checks. And thus the Gasshia was born. In a more serious theory, this could also be Zeon wanting to see if the amphibious mobile suit design could work in space. Next is maybe he was originally supposed to be an amphibious mobile suit, but because Zeon got pushed back into space, they halted a lot of amphibious mobile suits design, and they decided to focus on a few ones like the Zagok E and the Hygok, and maybe they just shelved or canned this one. But later on, during the Peasant Project, someone might have found these blueprints or design, dusted them off, and gave it a shot. And finally, since we can be on this subject all day, maybe Zeon was trying to do some resource management. Now this sounds dumb, but remember, at the time it's coming to the end of the 1 year war, Zeon got pushed out of Earth and their main forces are in space like I said. So while the forces are still on Earth can use amphibious mobile suits, they're not going to have any practical use in space. But what if, and this might be a stretch, but what if Zeon made a mobile suit that was somewhat cheap to produce and could salvage parts from amphibious mobile suits like the Zagok, giving these duster collectors a use in space? Now to support this, at that time Zeon was pushing the United Maintenance Program, which was supposed to push uniformed parts throughout Zeon's mobile suits for easier manufacturing and repairing. And this idea is found in the Peasant Project, with the Peasant Dwidge being based off the Dom and the Gundam Alpha being the mixture of a Gelgoog and a Gyan. So maybe this might be not too big of a stretch. Or maybe on the flip side, the Gasshia is a completely new model with a new frame and new parts and needs very specific parts to repair. Because this is Zeon and Zeon likes to do that. But pick your flavor, pick your poison. If you got another one, leave it down in the comments, but let's move on to some numbers. Starting with the head, height, body, torso thing, this part right here, he stands at 15.1 meters, compared to the Zagok being at 18.4 meters, but if we count these rocket shoulders, which we'll talk about in a second, we'll get close to that height. For weight at max, he's at 116.5 metric tons, and empty he's at 89.7. For his power output, he's pushing 1076 kilowatts, and he's made out of a super hard steel alloy. There's not that much to go into when it comes to his numbers. Other interesting things is his max accelerations at 0.37 Gs, and his max speed is at 55 kilometers an hour on the ground. And for an odd thing, the Gasshia has two pilots, a pilot and a co-pilot. Now this is strange since a majority of mobile suits only have one pilot, and the ones that don't have a good reason. Like the gun tank has a pilot which can be the driver, and the co-pilot which can be the gunner, or the gun tank can just be piloted by one person. But in the Gasshia's case, I don't see the reason for it. The only thing I can think of is that the Gasshia is based off the Zagok, and the Zagok is noted to be a difficult mobile suit to pilot. So similar to that of planes having two pilots, it could just be to make the mobile suit easier to pilot. I doubt one pilot is using the weapons since he has such few ones. It just seems like a weird feature. Maybe if you guys have a good reason or you found a source for it, leave it down in the comments. Starting with equipment, there's one thing in particular, and that's the two antennae pointing downwards on his back. These are his ground sensors. While I have seen some sources refer to this as the anti-ground sensors and others as just ground sensors, either or they're either going to help his radar or disable others. Now moving on to weapons, we have his 4.2 180mm missile launchers. He has two of them, so 8 tubes in total. Located on these shoulder towers, when they're not in use they're tucked inside, but when ready they open up pointing forward, and that's the most interesting thing about them. They're simple 180mm explosive weapons. We've been through many of these before. They shoot straight forward, he can fire one at a time or all of them. The only other note is due to the placement actually. Because he is not an amphibious mobile suit, he doesn't have a cruise mode, so there's no point of them pointing upwards. But other than that, they're pretty simple. A nice thing about him is since they're on his shoulders, he can freely use his hands and his other weapons and use these at the same time. But other than that, let's move forward. Now moving into his arms, on each forearm we have his iron nails. These are 3 clawed, sharp, thick, basic instruments made for stabbing and slashing. His are depicted to be a little thicker and have some posability compared to that of the Zagok. They look similar to that of the Zok. And if you're familiar with amphibious mobile suits, you know the drill by now, but for the quickie, they provide a reliable melee weapon that doesn't run on any source like heat weapons or beam sabers. They are cheap, easy to repair or replace, reliable tools. Now for some downsides, first is that they have below average range because they're much shorter claws that just come out of the forearms, and next, which is the biggest, is that they can't clash with beam or heat weapons. The final note is the Gasshia's iron nails have a really weird thing about them, and that they can be used as manipulators. There are 2 things in particular that he's been shown to hold, however, it's an odd feature because with amphibious mobile suits for example, when they are shown holding regular standard tools, they actually have 5-finger manipulators. Examples would be like the Zogok, which just has 2 regular hands, and the Guagu, which has an optional 5-finger manipulator that you can use to hold a weapon. Also, we see mobile suits like the Zagok E and the Hygog having vice claws, which are iron nails most suitable to be used for manipulators. However, the Gasshia just straight up holds a regular weapon with these iron nails. It looks really goofy and there's much more mechanics to it, like it probably pegs into the forearm so it can use for support, but the biggest thing I just want to get across, it looks really weird and we don't see this a lot in Gundam. But let's get into those weapons. First is an optional weapon the Gasshia can carry, and those are crackers. These are Zeons grenades. They're simple, throwable explosives that many mobile suits have. They're either used on ground or in space, and they act like grenades. Simple as that. It is odd on the Gasshia obviously because he has iron nails and it just looks goofy of the Gasshia trying to pick up a cracker and tossing it. I feel like it would be trying to pick up a baseball with a claw machine. Anyways, the oddest thing about this is that it's listed on his line art where it just shows illustrations, but I've never seen the Gasshia depicted with this and I just kind of want to see him actually toss this. It just would seem goofy. But because you can throw the cracker, I expect you can throw every other throwable tool that Zeon has. I see no reason why not. It's just an odd thing. Now let's move on to one of the Gasshia's biggest oddities. This thing is as complex and interesting as the mobile suit himself, and this is his main weapon, the hammer gun. This is a one-handed, oddly shaped gun that has a large spike ball at the end. It fires it, which is attached to a chain. It's a very strange weapon, and it's one of the few spike ball and chains we see throughout a Gundam. So the first thing we're going to ask is why? Why was this thing made? And we actually have a reason. This was Zeon's answer to the Gundam Hammer, which was a giant spike ball and chain. So Zeon decided to put it on a gun. Simple as that. Now, why did they choose that decision? Going off what they said, this was Zeon's answer to the Gundam Hammer. I want to think that maybe someone at Zeon took that way too literally. Like maybe a few Zakus got the shit kicked out of them with the Gundam Hammer, and Zeon thought, oh, we need an answer to this, which means that we just need something sturdy enough to block the Gundam Hammer. But some higher up at R&D probably thought, oh, our answer to the Gundam Hammer is another Gundam Hammer. But in all seriousness, what led to the hammer gun being made is unknown. We just don't have that information, but we can go into some theories and speculations, since this mobile suit is the only time this weapon has ever been used. We don't see it anywhere else. So for one theory, maybe Zeon might have salvaged Gundam hammers, since the Dash 2 isn't the only one with it, and instead of throwing them away or recycling them, Zeon thought about using them, and instead of just giving it to a Zaku and hoping he can swing it right, they put them into a launcher. Or maybe on a similar path, Zeon just looked at that and thought, maybe we can make it but put in a gun, and they made everything from scratch. So moving to one of the big questions, and that is performance. How does it work? How well does it work? Well, we don't know a lot of the inner mechanics to it, so we don't know the launcher's power, we don't know how it retrieves the ball back, its reload. This is all unknown, but we can safely assume a few things. So first thing is, how powerful is it? Well, since it's being launched from this gun, we don't know what's launching it, like how it works, and we don't know how powerful the said launch is. But what I can assume that it is stronger than the Gundam Hammer, because the Gundam Hammer, all we have is the Gundam swinging it, then throwing it. But I think that it's either slightly less or equal to, or maybe even slightly stronger than the Hyper Hammer, because with the Hyper Hammer, he's swinging it, throwing it, and then it has thrusters which helps it shoot forward. And with this gun, it all leads to the power that launches the Hyper Hammer, which we just sadly do not know, but I feel like that's a good estimation. So what does this all mean? Well, it means if you're lightly or average armor, even if you have a shield, this thing's gonna fold you. Even if the mobile suit survives, it's gonna be heavily damaged, and the force transfer to the cockpit will make you into ground meat. But for more sturdy, heavily armored mobile suits, it's a different story. Because if we looked at the GOG, he survived being hit by the Hyper Hammer, but not only that, he got back up and caught the next swing. Now this all depends on the power of the hammer gun, which again we don't know. So next question is, how does this thing fare in space? Well, oddly, it does seem pretty cool. First is you don't have to deal with the gravity, so it's gonna go max range and not face drop off, which we haven't talked about the range, but it's really how far this thing can be launched or how far the chain can go, so maybe medium close range. Next is, you won't lose the momentum because again you don't have the gravity. But one interesting thing is the force being delivered. Because when you hit something in space and it's not prepared for it, it's gonna just go swinging in all different types of directions. Even if your mobile suit can survive the hit from it like the GOG, if the GOG's Venyas, and this is a weird comparison because the GOG can't go in space, but let's just say it can, the GOG, while surviving the hit, will be knocked all over the place and will be just ragdolling all over, and he would need his Venyas to get him back and just get him back on his feet. And by that time, the Gasshia can just go up and give him the good old stabbing. So it really depends on how well your mobile suit can handle in space, and how well you can get yourself back into working order if you just got ragdolled all over the place. Which sounds like a pretty nice weapon actually. Now for a fun fact, we do get a different depiction of this weapon for the opening of Jiren's Greed, Menace of Axis. In the opening, we briefly see the Gasshia fire the hammer gun, However, we don't see a chain attached to the gun nor the hammer, and this could have just been a simple oversight, or it's such a short scene they didn't bother with it, and we could brush it off as that. However, just for entertainment reasons, let's take it as it is. One could be the chain got damaged and they had to deploy without it. This would just mean that if he fires it, he would have to go to the hammer, reload it back in manually, and he's good to go. The next could be this is an early depiction prototype of this weapon which didn't have the chain, but later on they thought, hey, what if we added a chain so this weapon could be reeled back in without you going all the way to it, which later they did. Whatever you want, or if you guys have a reason, leave it down in the comments. And the final note about the hammer gun I want to talk about is also about the Gasshia, and that is, can his iron nails hold any other weapon? Or is the hammer gun specifically made so the Gasshia can hold it with his iron nails? Well, we already went over that maybe he has a peg. The iron nails do look like they can hold it. They just look like 3 thick fingers. Can he hold like a Zaku machine gun? Can he hold a rocket launcher? Or is it just made specifically for him? And on the flip side, can a Zaku hold the hammer gun? And this question gets raised again because unlike the Zogok and Guagu, which are amphibious and do have the 5-finger manipulator option, they only hold certain things because only certain things can go into water. But unlike the Gasshia, he doesn't have that problem, so he might actually benefit from holding other weapons. And that's everything I want to share with the Gasshia. However, we're not done yet because I do want to add a segment, and I want to talk about a what if scenario, and what if the Gasshia was a amphibious mobile suit. So let me introduce you to the MS-13M Gasshia marine type, aqua type, name pending. So at first I was brainstorming, then I sadly came to a simple conclusion, and realistically speaking, if he was an amphibious mobile suit, he would just be a Zagok, but what's the fun in there? Let's do some brainstorming. First thing is the shoulder rockets. Maybe they can pivot more upwards just so he can have something to use in cruise mode, or maybe he's gonna have a backpack similar to that of the aqua type or the marina, so he has rockets that can shoot straight up. Now, I do want to take a note from the 8 guy, and maybe one of his iron nails has a mega particle cannon in it, or a Vulcan gun if you want to cut costs, and the other one can just be a regular one that he has that can hold weapons. And speaking about the weapons, I don't think the hammer gun will be that great in water, so maybe he can have another amphibious weapon, such as like a harpoon gun, or some type of sub-rock gun. But yeah, that's all I could think of. I wanted to keep it realistic, and like I said, realistically, he's just a worst off Zagok. So we're gonna come to an end, and let's wrap everything up. So what can we say? Well, at the end, the Gasshia did finish development, and he was sent out in extremely limited numbers. And while he was a land and space Zagok with extra steps, he didn't make the same impact as the Zagok, because, well, he wasn't awful, he did his job, but he was meh. There was much better mobile suits at that time, and even deployed with him during the Peasant Project. And he just doesn't really have anything to talk proudly about. He was an idea that Zeon wanted to do, and they did, but the results were underwhelming at best. And unless he was made out of recycled amphibious mobile suit parts, I don't see a reason for Zeon to proceed in further development of the Gasshia. And as for the hammer gun, I'm still stuck on the idea of it being officially noted as Zeon's answer to the Gundam Hammer, since why the hell would they need one? It's not like the Gundam Hammer is the reason the Federation won the war. It's not like the reason the Gundam was terrifying. Okay, I'm getting too much into that, but again, someone took it way too literally. It just boggles my mind. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I wanted to take a detour from the usual amphibious mobile suits and cover a mobile suit that, yes, similar, but more the fact that it was niche and it's something I really liked, and I do want to do more of these. And while I still want to stick with amphibious analysis, if you like these types of videos of me going offshoot covering other things in the Gundam universe, tell me in the comments down below or leave a like. And like usual, my name is Slothcakes, and I hope to see you in the next video, and have a good one.